Dude, I am fired up to share with you about one of, if not the best weekends of fellowship, spiritual encouragement, and live classic Christian hard rock and metal ever in my life, man. This was fantastic. Immortal Fest 2023.
Rocking you up for Jesus Christ with classic style hard rock music and practical Bible teaching.
My wife Kelly and I set out from Cookeville, Tennessee here on Friday and drove up to Greenville, Ohio, which is about 15 minutes from the venue, the BMI Event Center. We checked into the Quality Inn there in Greenville. Totally recommend it. Looking forward to staying there, hopefully, next year. My brother Brent, who lives in our hometown there in Anderson, Indiana, where I grew up, just due west an hour and a half from Versailles. He drove over on Saturday morning. Brent and I arrived at the BMI Event Center around 1:45. The doors were scheduled to open at 2 o'clock. Neither one of us really had any idea what to expect. We'd never been there before. Of course, we'd already checked this out. BMI holds approximately 1,500 people, so we knew there probably wasn't a real bad seat in the house. But boy, when we got there, were we surprised. First off, we pulled in the parking lot right beside the building, 50 yards from the door, and found a parking space. That's never happened. Okay, dude. Here we are, BMI. You coming up to it. This is going to be awesome. We'll see if we can get to know some folks here. Sweet. I wore my PB t-shirt, of course. Basically, I was hoping that it might help me connect with people who are part of the Pastor Brad Rocks family and had seen me wear this in videos, and it did. Within 2 minutes of arriving, I hear this voice, "Are you Pastor Brad?" And I look up, and it's Steve, and he's there with his lovely wife and it's either their son or their grandson. I didn't really get to know him, so I'm not sure. But either way, Steve, I had met him with my wife Kelly in Nashville last year at a Striper show. He'd driven up from Alabama. Now he'd driven up from Central Alabama. Sorry if you're from Alabama. Don't know if you call it Central or Middle. Either way, they'd driven up to Versailles for this event. Steve is a good brother, man. I remember the first time we met, he said, "Hey, man, I saw you perform at Cornerstone in 2009. And I was like, whoa. I mean, how random is that? So we're standing there hanging out talking, and I look over and I see another person wearing another PB t-shirt just like mine. So of course I go over and say, "Hey, man," and I introduce myself, and it's Paul, who is a great brother whom I've gotten to know through the channel. We've exchanged some messages, and he and his wife had driven all the way over from Arkansas for Immortal Fest. It was so cool to meet him, especially like that. And thank you, Paul, for wearing that shirt. That was super cool. Just, kind of spreading the word. But it was so cool to meet him and get a picture with him and connect like that. So the doors opened right at 2, so it was a very short wait. There wasn't even a huge line. And from the moment we walked in, the entire atmosphere was sweet and chill. All right, so that's the entrance. Just want to give you a feel. This is a super cool place. Got like refreshments and stuff over here. Versailles, Ohio, BMI Event Center. It's where Immortal Fest is going to be. You walk through here, through the doors into the main event area. You can tell by the feel. Almost looks like it used to be like a airplane hangar or something. I'm sure it wasn't, but then you got this wall here that's kind of lit up glass. Goes around here. Hey, dude. Then if you're blind like me, you get kind of lost and can't figure out where you are. Okay, here we go. And into the main area, dude. Pretty cool. So then we're going to walk up here. My brother's hanging out close to the front row.
Can you hear me? Oh, now you can. Yeah, actually sounds great now. I was going to ask.
Might be Gary Chapman doing
I think you already did.
Sound check.
It's not. I felt it anyway,
and
so there.
This is like special seating.
And then maybe just a little more vocal.
Again, I think that's Gary doing the sound check.
Anywhere else.
And here we are. The BMI Event Center was actually at one point a family fun center. One of these places, if you've raised kids, where you bring your kids and there's all these video games everywhere. And then there's a go-kart track, right, that you can pay and race each other around. And that's what the main floor was. It used to be the go-kart track. The family who purchased it, and the name I kept hearing was Angie. Several of the band members mentioned her, and she must be kind of the one spearheading things. They turned it into this event center, and it's so well laid out. By the way, that comment I made about being blind and losing my way, and if you're blind like me, you get kind of lost. I don't talk about this real often, but I literally am legally blind, okay? That's a long story, but the short version is in 1988, I had a benign brain tumor removed. Praise God, it was benign, and I haven't had any kind of reoccurring issue from it since. But it did affect my optic nerves, and I lost 75% of my vision. So next year at Immortal Fest, I certainly hope to be there, and I hope you can be there. If I walk up to you or past you and you're like, dude, we met last year, and he didn't even, it's not because I'm being rude. I just didn't see you, okay? So come up and say, hey, Pastor Brad, and we'll connect. Immortal Fest, as I understand it, is the vision of the owners of the BMI Event Center. They're believers, and they've got a heart for the metal community. They're also doing something really super cool, man. I love this idea. You may have noticed when I showed both sides, the left and right of the venue, that there were these lit up signs, and those signs are promoting upcoming shows. Well, check out these three. Stephen Piercy was on the bill, and guess who's warming up for Stephen Piercy? Whitecross. I don't know if you're like me, but over the years I've talked with people, and there's always this comparison. Whitecross sounds like Rat, man. So how cool is it to bill Whitecross with Rat and have them open up for that band and for that audience? And then Queensryche's coming there. A Christian band that sounds a lot like Queensryche at times is Sacred Warrior, and they're opening up for Queensryche. And then finally, Quiet Riot's going to be there, and Saint is going to open up for Quiet Riot. I never really compared them to Saint, but either way, that's awesome. What an opportunity for these Christ-honoring bands to have an opportunity to witness for an audience that is tailor-made for their music and to lift up Christ. I don't know if anybody from BMI is going to watch this video, but way to go. That is awesome, man. Keep it up. In Ephesians chapter 5, verse 16, the Apostle Paul says, make the most of every opportunity in these evil days. And that phrase evil days doesn't mean like that one time back in the first century. This side of heaven, until Christ returns, we live in a broken world, and these are evil days. And Paul's saying everything you can do in this life, whatever gift God's given you, whatever opportunities you have, make the most of them for the gospel. And man, the folks over at BMI are certainly doing that. As the crowd started to fill in, I met so many cool people, some of whom I had corresponded with online for years, but had never met face to face. First, there was Dale. He's on my left in this picture. I had just recently connected with Dale through the channel here. Dale authored the official Striper bio, which is available everywhere, by the way, including Amazon. That's where I got the picture for it here. He's also the drum tech for Michael, the drummer of Whitecross. Super cool dude. So enjoyed connecting with him and getting to know him this weekend. And then there's Rex and Jody, his wife, on my right. Rex is part of the crew that runs the Area 312 channel here on YouTube. They do so many awesome interviews with personalities from classic Christian metal. Check out Area 312. It is a great channel. By the way, you might be thinking, okay, Area 312, what's that about? Why would you name your YouTube channel about Christian metal or Christian rock Area 312? I had the same question when I first discovered the channel until I was perusing through Resurrection Band or Res Band's catalog, and I found a song called Area 312. Turns out that Area 312 is an area within Chicago that is filled with a lot of public housing and folks that just have some real economic and social challenges, and there's a high crime rate, and it's an area that Japuza, which is Jesus People USA, the community that Res Band is part of, have a love for that comes, of course, from the love of Christ and a desire to reach these people. So over the years, they've ministered and reached out to these folks, and they wrote this song about it. Here's a picture of Chad, who I also met for the first time this weekend. He and his wife had driven over from Iowa, and when I met Chad's wife, I think it was Chad's wife, I asked, do you enjoy this kind of music as well? And the answer, and it wasn't just Chad's wife, but all the wives that I spoke with, I think Paul's wife said a similar thing. She said, no, I'm just here to support my husband, and it's like, it's just so funny because my wife Kelly also really likes like CCM, and she would much prefer Mercy Me over what we were experiencing that weekend, right? She was hanging out at the hotel, just saying, hey, I love the chill time. You go enjoy the event, you and your brother. And afterward, I was talking with her, and she said, you know what? Next year, if there's several wives who make the trip, not like we have to hang out the whole weekend, but we could definitely take one of the evenings and do something fun together. So next year, when Immortal Fest rolls around, I pray I'll remember to make that offer, and maybe the wives can get together on one night and enjoy some fellowship and hang out. This is Tom, who I met just coming right out of a doorway, and it was another one of those, he saw me with the shirt, and he goes, are you Pastor Brad? And I'm like, yeah, dude. So we got this picture together. Tom, I didn't know him as Tom. I always knew him as Follower of Jesus, as that was his handle on the Christian Metal Realm and the Christian Hard Music forums. I was part of both of those forums for years back in the early 2000s. Just a good brother with whom I had talked about Christian music for years and had never met. Here again is the picture Paul Paul and I got together out in the line before the doors opened. So cool to connect with him. Man, way to go, Paul. I'm so glad you made that trip over from Arkansas. And then here's a picture of me with Gary and his girlfriend. Gary and I actually have quite a story. I first met Gary at Cornerstone in 2009 as well. After I played my first set, he interviewed me right out in front of the sanctuary tent.
A special edition of Tongues of Fire Show. I'm Gary, your metal missionary, and we're here live at Cornerstone 2009, and I'm talking with Pastor Brad.
And then there was Rod Fogel. Oh my goodness. I'm in line for something else, and I turn to my right, and I see this dude wearing this really cool Too Late for Living Saint shirt. I'm like, dude, did you get that here? And he's like, yeah. And then all of a sudden he says, are you Brad Winland? Yeah. And I looked, oh, Rod Fogel. This was a dude I went to Anderson University with in my hometown, Christian Liberal Arts University, when I first started to school. And we had hung, and of course he was a guitar player. We were all into metal, and we were buds. The last time I saw Rod was in 2016 in Indianapolis for the 30th anniversary tour that Stryper was on, celebrating To Hell with the Devil. And it was just one of those like, dude moments, where we got this picture that was cool to see Rod. And there's Steve and I again. It was so awesome to meet you, Steve, and to connect with you, and I hope we see a lot more of each other. And then Chris, all dat and then some, Dickens. Chris is another one of those brothers that I had connected with on the Christian Metal Realm forum, and Chris actually admins and I think even created the Christian Hard Music forum. Chris is one of the very first people that ever wrote a review of any of my music. Back in 2004 when I released Out of the Hellhole, Chris wrote a review of that album. 2004, there was no social media, yada, 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 and I was just trying so hard to kind of break out there and get my music heard by people. Because when you create music, you want to share it, right? You write it to encourage people, and I'm trying to get it out there, and Chris wrote this review. It helped me out so much. Great brother, man. So cool to meet you face to face. And then there's Sam, man. Sam is a relatively newer friend. We've connected about a year ago. Matter of fact, this is such an interesting story. Sam reached out to me in response to a video, and he told me that he had just surrendered his life to Jesus Christ at a Barren Cross concert. I had no idea where the concert was or any of that, and we had a phone call. We talked together, and I was just encouraging him about getting grounded in the Lord and some things, and we were just kind of connecting. It was awesome. I was so thrilled for him, to have made this decision for Christ. So when this came up, he said, he's from Ohio. He's like, dude, I'm going to be at Immortal Fest. That's awesome. And then I found out that the concert where he had surrendered his life to Christ was actually last year. Last year was the very first Immortal Fest. Barren Cross was there. And when they presented the gospel, Sam received the Lord. What an awesome story. By the way, I really hope that Barren Cross comes back sometime. I would love to see them. I know that they're kind of on the back burner and not doing very much, but that would be so cool. But it was very fun to get this picture with Sam and meet you face to face, brother. The afternoon kicked off with two classic artists. Not hard rock, but great. Gary Chapman and Matthew Ward. I remember seeing Gary back in the late 80s when he was married to Amy Grant, and he was opening up for her at Market Square Arena. I believe it was the Lead Me On album. I was never really super into Gary, but I really enjoyed him at Immortal Fest. Really his personality, and just his sharing, his genuineness. It was great.
So another trick that the enemy seems to be quite adept at is to divide us. I don't know if anybody's noticed it or not, but there's some division that is happening in our world at every turn. Color, politics, culture, you name it. You name it. And he's going to try to find a way to make it a wedge between you and me. And if we fall for it, we're stupid.
And then Matthew Ward, oh my goodness, what a flashback that was, man. I saw Matthew with the second chapter of Acts, which was he and two of his sisters, on tour in Muncie, Indiana at a high school auditorium. It was real soon after Keith Green's plane had gone down. And I remember that being a poignant moment in the show when they talked about that and were remembering Keith and sang some of his songs because they were very close. Matthew was one of the artists that I tried to check out in the early 80s. The very early 80s, it was so hard to find good Christian hard rock. There was Res Band and one or two others, Jerusalem, some others. But, I was trying to find stuff that compared with AC/DC and Maiden and Judas Priest, and I just couldn't find. But anyway, I checked out Matthew Ward, and I really liked his song, It's All Right. And he opened up with that, and that was just super cool. I learned something this weekend. I had always known about X Center, and I had watched and listened to some of the songs of Zion, and I knew kind of who they were, but I didn't know Rex Scott was the singer for both. I don't know why. I mean, he's got such a distinct voice. I should have caught it. But at the end of X Center's set, they did some Zion songs, and it was so cool. By the way, if you haven't heard Zion, it's kind of hard to find their music, but you can definitely find it on YouTube if you just type in Z-I-O-N, Zion, Christian metal. You'll find some cool stuff. And at the end of the first evening, this happened. I, along with my brother, finally got to meet Saint face to face. You guys have watched in some of my past videos, one of my favorite Christian metal bands of all time. Granted, Richard, the bass player who has the blonde hair in this picture, is the only original member, but it was so cool to meet Richard face to face and shake these dudes' hands and thank them. And the singer, I was so impressed with him live. I'm sorry, I don't remember his name right now. I would just always think of Josh, you know? But it was so cool to meet them face to face and get this picture. What an awesome memory. I hope you're really enjoying this video, man. I hope it's rocking you up for Jesus. Right now, I want to take just a moment and talk about one way that you can really support this channel and ministry. You know, over the years, I've been blessed to release over 25 albums, and one of those is Storm the Gates. It contains 9 Christ-honoring parodies by bands like AC/DC, Judas Priest, Kiss, Quiet Riot, Black Sabbath, and others. You can find it anywhere that you listen to or download music, including my Pastor Brad Bandcamp page, which is a great place if you like to own the files. You can download them there. Anywhere, add them to your playlists, share them with your friends, man. Really appreciate that support. The second day, which was Sunday, was another awesome day of fellowship and worship and music. Larry Worley, who is one of the guitar players for Fear Not, he opened the whole thing with a worship set. He actually leads worship at his home church. So he got up there with an acoustic guitar, and the whole community, and that's, I really think of it as a family, a community, and that was something else that happened this weekend I'll say more about in a moment. But we just worshiped the Lord together. It was so sweet. And then Glenn Kaiser, who, in case you're not familiar, he is one of the founding members of Res Band, lead guitarist, lead vocalist, just an amazing brother. He's also an ordained minister, I learned, has been for years, got up and brought just a powerful message. I'm actually going to release this whole message as its own video coming up real soon. It blessed and challenged me so much. It was great. Glenn and his wife, Wendy, who was also part of Resurrection Band for all those years, learned, by the way, that they've been married for 51 years. How awesome is that? But Wendy got up there with him on stage, and he did an acoustic set of just blues music, which is a real passion for Glenn, and he builds what he calls cigar box guitars. They're these really unique instruments that just have like 3 strings. He even played one instrument that just had 1 string. And all these instruments kind of had a history of going back to the origins of blues in the African American community, and he was telling some really cool stories, and if you're into the history of guitar, it was really cool. And he and Wendy did some really cool stuff together. And then things got a little bit heavier.
I gotta run from the darkness that I once knew. I gotta run to the brightness that led in you. You came enough to pick me up. You brought me through. You came enough to fill my cup, and I thank you. I thank you.
And then this happened. Steve actually came over. He said, Brad, dude, Les is right over here. Speaking of Les Carlson, who had just finished his set. There was always about a half hour or so between bands. They were getting ready to set up for Sacred Warrior. And he said, hey man, Les is right over here. And I'm like, what, right over where? And remember, I'm blind. So this was so cool of Steve to do. And he said, right over here, man, by the merch table. And he brought me over. There he was, hanging out. And I waited in this little line. It wasn't even a long line. It was crazy. And I went right up to him, and he was so gracious. I said, Les, I said, Pastor Brad. I introduced myself. I said, you may not remember this, but I said, back in 2009, you actually sang a song on one of my Pastor Brad albums. And he was like, oh yeah, man, I remember that. I said, Bill Bafford from Rocks Records had connected us, and I remember calling you, and we had a short conversation. And I said, you only had one question for me. You said, is this about glorifying Jesus? I said, it's all about glorifying Jesus. And you said, I'm in, man. And I just reminded him how gracious he was, because he didn't just record one vocal track for that song. He recorded multiple tracks, like the lead vocal and then all the background stuff. It took some time. It was a super gracious thing for him to do for free. And so we had a cool little connection, and I got to tell him that I'd seen Bloodgood back in 1989 and how I was a young Christian at that time and how it was just so encouraging and impactful in my life, and just a cool moment of meeting, one of your heroes. And then Sacred Warrior came on, and they just absolutely killed it. Three takeaways from this weekend. First, Immortal Fest is an even bigger deal than I thought it was. I was kind of expecting just 2 days of just a Christian rock concert. It wasn't, man. It was a gathering of a family. It was the Christian metal community, the classic Christian metal community. If you're not familiar, Immortal Fest has a part 1 and a part 2. Part 1 is the more recent bands. I think the first weekend included bands like Disciple and Theocracy and some bands like that, which aren't like brand new, but they're newer than Sacred Warrior and X Center and all that. So this was the classic weekend, and it was just a gathering of people who have all cut their teeth on that music coming up and who love the Lord. It was worship, it was fellowship, and it was something that Angie and this family who own BMI want to see grow and become an annual thing.
We think everybody in here tonight is a family. Immortal Fest, BMI Center, they're creating a family, man. Like Kaiser and them was up here earlier, they had Jesus People USA. We had Cornerstone, that was a family. And I believe this is creating a new family of God people. You see a lot of same faces back. We just want to say we love everyone in there.
I was so bummed because Pastor Bob couldn't make it. He wasn't feeling well. And so it was like, bummer. But he's going to, I know as long as his health holds out, we'll try to be there each year. Number 2, all these bands were amazing. Now, you're thinking, of course they are, man. We love their music, right? But to see them live, I got a new appreciation for Daniel Band, who is much heavier live than the recordings. And of course, a lot of that has to do with production and the abilities or lack thereof that they had in the early 80s. But they were just great. And the vocals, man, if you're my age, there are certain bands that we maybe listened to in the 70s and 80s and they just can't sing anymore. These dudes could all nail it. And number 3, I needed this in ways I didn't even know I needed it. I was refreshed. I was refilled. I was inspired. It was so awesome to just connect with people who love the Lord and love metal. Just a spirit of warmth and koinonia there, man, that was just fantastic. And I am so looking forward to making this an annual thing, Lord willing. If you missed it this year, man, I'll be talking about it when it comes around. And again, that's all in the Lord's hands. We have no idea what tomorrow holds. But if things work out and it comes around next year, I'll be talking about it. And I hope you can make it, man. I'd love to meet you and connect with you. If you enjoyed this video, man, be sure to give it a like and share this link with a friend. Leave your comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this video. Any questions you have, interact with you. If you liked this video, I think you'll like these videos as well. Check them out. Keep your eyes on our Lord and our Savior, Jesus Christ, man. And I'll catch you in the next video.